So let's begin with some meditation. Just taking maybe 10, 15 minutes to settle in and really take stock of what's happening in our own body and mind right now in this moment. And whatever group gets together, there are always some of us who are going through hard times, harder than usual, and there are always some who are having a bit of a time of ease. But when we bring our attention to the present moment and we really check in with the body, and it's hard to know. I mean, in any moment, we could be feeling better than we have been, or than we've perceived that we have been, or maybe there is an immediate challenge of pain and discomfort. You know, when we give it some loving attention, sometimes that can bring a certain level of ease with it. So just becoming aware. And maybe if putting attention on your breathing is something that's comfortable and helpful, then breathing into that area that's tight or stressed or in pain can bring ease, can be helpful. We are establishing our mindfulness, and we can also be establishing right intention. An attitude, a framework, a backdrop of kindness, gentleness, letting go. It's regardless of what we want or what we want to get rid of. There is this reality of what's here and now, right in this present moment. And the first step to making things better is to be able to be present with this as it is. And of course, we're always perceiving this present moment from the space of our own perceptions, our own ideas, our own conditioning. And as Dhamma practitioners, we want to try to see this present moment, observe what's happening, what we're feeling, whatever input is coming in through the senses, from a perspective of Dhamma. Knowing that whatever is happening in this present moment, it's impermanent. And if it's a really good feeling, if it's really miserable, regardless where it falls on the scale of what we want or don't want, it's still impermanent. And clinging to it, identifying with it, and heaping on any other kind of judgment or feeling or resistance adds to the dukkha. Any clinging or craving adds to the dukkha. So noticing how the top of your head feels. Maybe it's fine. Maybe it's painful there. Maybe taking a few deeper breaths can help relax whatever tension there might be around your eyes, your jaw. Really taking a little time to be kind, accepting, loving. Moving down through the body, your neck, your shoulders, across your back, all the way down your spine, and then also chest, belly. Just noticing how things feel, letting go of stress and tension, relaxing into whatever you're sitting or lying on, letting go of any tension in your arms or your hands, appreciating all the areas that are calm and not feeling pain and discomfort, and bringing a sense of loving kindness to those areas that are stressed. And relaxing your legs, relaxing your feet, breathing in and feeling, imagining, encouraging the breath to go through the entire body, spreading to fingertips and your toes everywhere. Really accepting this experience that is the state of your body right now. And noticing the state of the mind. Thoughts that arise, they come and they go. The mood or the sort of atmosphere of the mind. Just observing it, seeing what we can learn from it. Bringing kindness and gentleness to it. Some empathy, some compassion. some appreciation of what we find there is joyful, happy, relaxed. And in this moment, the mind has already probably changed. Some new thought, something different. The Buddha said there isn't anything that moves so fast as the mind. You can't even really come up with a good simile for how fast the mind moves. So observing it, noticing. From that aspect, that space of stability, that knowing, and that knowing that brings wisdom and kindness, gentleness, and guidance to the mind. Is really observing our own bodies and our own mental states from a place of Dhamma. It's the strongest medicine there is. To see the truth of the way things actually are. Yeah, appreciation for what's good in the world, what's good in us. There's a vast amount of goodness. Immeasurable, really. And the defilements, those things that stain the mind. Buddha said they're adventitious, almost showing up as visitors, by accident. It's not quite by accident, it can be by various causes and conditions, but they're not the permanent residents of the mind. So we can shift in the direction of what's bright, uplifting, compassionate, kind, loving, happy. And then it's our opportunity to learn more every time that shift occurs, about how to encourage that shift to happen, where we can leave anger, resentment, sadness behind. There are lots of causes and conditions that bring the difficult, negative thoughts and feelings up in the mind, in the heart. But there's also this wonderful medicine that changes that experience regardless of whatever the conditions are. We don't have to depend on things changing outside of ourselves. We can make that shift inside. There's so many beautiful stories and examples that we've seen in the world, in people, in some of the toughest situations. And they can see through it and respond from a space of wisdom and kindness. Selflessness. When we take the basic principle of living from the sense of self, we suffer. When we take the basic principle of living from Dhamma, we feel relief. So I've been reflecting on something Ajahn Genha told us last time we visited him. He said this actually when the nuns were up talking with him. He asked us to come up and have a session with him. He told us many things, but one of the things he said is, don't let the mind be gloomy. And it's like, how do we not let the mind be gloomy, especially under certain circumstances? What can we do? And it really does start with being present. First and foremost, we have to be willing to really be with whatever is happening. Our own experience of this body and mind. And it's like it doesn't work to try to cover it over and act like it's different than it is. This is the first noble truth. And to recognize that there's suffering in it. And this is even when we're happy, even when we're joyful. It's like if we're just happy and joyful because the conditions are good, there's always some stress underlying it. But if we're happy and joyful because we're grounded in the Dhamma, then the weather of life continues to change and we don't have to change with it. It's powerful. And we know it. We know this is true, but we forget. Because the circumstances in life can be so incredibly strong, incredibly sort of powerful and kind of knocking us off center. So we practice righting ourselves, regaining our stability. And it's true whether it's something exciting and stimulating, or it's something terrifying, troubling. And then how do we do it? How do we bring ourselves back? So we all can see, and first it starts with mindfulness. And maybe we bring in reflections on Dhamma so that we can come back to like what's really happening here. Illness, yeah. This body goes through all kinds of experiences with it. I had a really wonderfully awesome meditation period a couple days ago. And it was really, I want to say, preconditioned by reflections on something that happened to me 20 years ago. It's almost 20 years now. I was at Ajahn Kalyano's monastery near Melbourne, Australia. I was staying in that area for about a month, and my son was there as a monk, and I was spending quite a lot of time with the monks in the community, and I was working a lot with the three characteristics at that time, like everything, is impermanent, dukkha, not self. And one of the things that we did, just 2 or 3 monks and myself were watching a video of an autopsy that was filmed in Thailand. And the autopsy was of someone who had been killed, and it was a forensic autopsy, really trying to understand what happened. And I'm not going to go into the details, but the reflection for me was very powerful, sobering, really, and relating it to some things that were going on in my own body with my health. I think I mentioned last time I've been going through about a month or more of this stomach problems, and in the autopsy I was remembering how the doctor took a ladle and he was ladling the contents of the stomach out to examine it. They were trying to figure out where this man had had dinner to try to track down where what was happening in his life that led to his getting killed. And it's like the the relating to it, like, you know, like what would happen if we just ladled out the contents of my stomach and, you know, and I don't know if I can communicate the the way in which the reality of the body could settle into my mind and heart so deeply that it would help the mind let go, that the mind could let go into a richer, deeper experience of Dhamma, of truth. And you know, it's of course not the right approach for us at any all the time. You know, we have these various tools to help us see, and particularly what we want to see is how what we do, everything that we take in, everything that comes in through the senses, everything that comes up in the mind, how we can see that, we can see how that contributes to the next thought that comes up or the next mental state that arises. So if we're spending a significant amount of time or any amount of time distracted with, you know, what's online or whatever, you know, that has an impact on, you know, like how gloomy is the mind, and what is it, what are the causes and conditions that help the mind to rise above the gloom, or to really be fundamentally happy, joyful. And it's interesting because we can see examples around us and see examples in the world where even though conditions can be really, really difficult, there can be a fundamental peacefulness inside, a fundamental kind of appreciation for what's good in that moment, regardless of what's happening. So it was mentioned this event last night about the you know, really raising funds for an effort that's happening in Gaza. It's called Mrs. Nara's Kitchen. And I don't know a lot about the details, but this woman and her family have been working for a long time providing meals to the people who are displaced. And I didn't attend the event, of course, I'm in retreat, but the person who did shared with me how powerful it was to be thinking about what was happening for people in Gaza right now, and to realize that the problems that we're having, and they were talking about themselves, just pale by comparison. There's always this kind of comparison we can do. We oftentimes we choose the comparison of looking at who's got it better than we have it. Who's smarter, who's richer, who's in better health, who's younger, you know, like we can always like find some example of somebody who's got it better than we have it. But we can also find the examples of people who are challenged in the moment, and really look at, you know, how valuable it is to appreciate when we're not in that state. And even when we are, whatever state we're in, you know, to really appreciate what's good in the mix, the things we can do, instead of mourning the things we can't do, at least at this particular juncture. And to think about the ways that we can bring more light, more life, more kindness, more compassion, more love to this present moment, more brightness. So one of the things that I thought I would share with you is just one, like there are so many places in the suttas where we see suggestions for how we can uplift the mind. And I just came across one that I want to share. It's in the Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses, and it's in the Book of Sixes. It's number 96. One translation calls this very short sutta manifestation, another one calls it appearance. But it's like these 6 things that are rare in the world, that arise in the world. And we could think about this as, like, oh, these 6 rare things. And is this what's happening in my life? And the first one, it's rare in the world for a Tathagata, a Buddha, perfectly enlightened one, to arise in the world. Well, that's happening in our life. I mean, we are in this period of time in human history where we have the knowledge of the Buddha, someone with that kind of awakening and wisdom. And then the second one is that it's rare in the world that someone can teach the Dhamma and Vinaya, teach the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata. And there are those people around. And it's rare in the world to be reborn in a sphere of the noble ones, that there are those people who have attained levels of enlightenment, and we can interact with them and listen to their talks and observe their example. And then the fourth one, it says that it's rare in the world to be endowed with unimpaired sense faculties. You can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, feel, and think. It's rare in the world to be intelligent and astute, to have the intelligence that you have. And it's rare in the world for people to be enthusiastic for skillful qualities. These 6 things. And when we find ourselves not enthusiastic about skillful qualities, we can change that. We can bring more to it. It's like I really, I mean, you've heard me say this probably many times before, but I really like this idea. Ajahn Punadhammo brings it up quite a bit. Ajahn Pasana, when he was looking to Ajahn Pasana as a teacher, as he was developing as a monk, Ajahn Pasana would often say, if you can't get out of it, get into it. And it applies to like everything. Like if you can't get out of this health situation, get into it. Like, what can I do with this to bring about more wisdom, to bring about more compassion? What can I do with this situation in my life to understand the Dhamma better? How can I get into it? If we feel bored, if we feel gloomy, how can I get into it, whatever the situation is? What can I put into it? If you feel irritated by someone, what can you put into understanding where they're coming from? Seeing whatever good qualities they have. There's nobody who's completely bereft of good qualities. So I know I told you that during the Vasa I'm reading the Vinaya, and I talked a little bit about Devadatta before, and I'm just gonna mention I reread the whole story, or I read parts of it I hadn't seen before just the other day. And I'm just so fascinated by the Buddha's approach to this. And this is his cousin. He's gone completely the wrong way. He already has, tried to kill the Buddha a few times. And the Buddha knows this. And still, Devadatta is still a monk. The Buddha's had this warning announced to the people of the city to, know that he's not operating in conjunction with the Buddha. Like, don't trust him. He's lost it. But then Devadatta wants to come and talk to the Buddha, and the Buddha has him come talk to him. He talks to him, and it's like the Buddha is so capable of being present with this person who's actually been trying to kill him and is so like consumed by his own greed and and huge sense of ego and desire for honor and material gain. And the Buddha just responds to his questions with the truth. Amazing. Of course, he's the Buddha. At one point, when the monks knew that Devadatta was trying to, various ways, trying to kill the Buddha's in his kuti. I think this was after the rock had hit, the stone had cut the Buddha. Drawing the blood of a Tathagata is a very bad thing to do if you want karmic freedom. But he's in his kuti recovering, and the monks are standing guard outside his kuti, and they're chanting really loud because they're all around his kuti and they're chanting. And Ananda comes in and the Buddha says, "What is all that about?" And he said, "Oh, they're trying to protect you." And he said, "You just tell them the Tathagata is not going to die by violence. They don't have to do that. They can just relax." And I'm like, so okay, he's the Buddha. I'm not the Buddha. If someone's trying to kill me, I might not react quite in the same way, but I still want to see if I can follow the Buddha's example of wisdom and knowing and coming from Dhamma and not making the karma that will carry on and perpetuate more situations like this one in my life or in the lives of others. This is really the place to come from, that we can always find examples of what's being done that's wrong. And we can always find examples of what's being done that leads to more peace, more happiness, and a bright, uplifted mind. So that was what I wanted to share today, and I'd really like to hear comments and questions. Thank you. Just to add, there's an aspect of this that's very important, which is to not be harsh with ourselves if we're not responding the way the Buddha did or the way we would like to. It's all part of the learning. And also recognizing that others aren't going to respond the way the Buddha did or the way we would like them to. And that's also part of the learning. Holly?
Thank you for this talk. This was so relevant to a large span of my life. Um, Responding to people with different viewpoints and having it trigger anger. I can think of a time I was hiking up in the forest in the fall, and we bushwhacked down to another trail, and there was a guy armed to the teeth with gun and high-powered bow, and he kind of accosted us that we shouldn't be there. It was hunting season, I guess, and I immediately got my hackles up and I don't know, said a bunch of stupid things. My friends thought, Holly, what are you doing? And just like, there's no need for me to do that. And I go back to the thing at Hewlett Packard, where I had friends, coworkers who were fundamentalist Christians, and I'd try and engage them in a discussion of interpretations of passages of the Bible. That was a lost cause. And what I realized was, in order for them to let go of their boundaries of who and how you could love, they would have to let go of fundamental belief systems in the very thing that fueled their lives, and they were never going to do that.
Yeah.
And the hunter was probably trying to protect me from having somebody else shoot me, us. But I couldn't see it at the moment. So it's the talk was really spoke to those things, how to be in the worldly winds and not be buffeted by an opposing or hostile view. And I have times now where I feel that I'm in that situation and I just go, not me, not mine. And to me, it's like self-view squared. It's like my self-view bumps up against another strong self-view, and boy, that's the root of conflict. So now I kind of feel like when that happens, that other person's perhaps hostile or very different view, I just let it blow by. And it's not my view. I don't pick it up. I just let it blow on by. And I'm sure I could still do better in my responses, but it doesn't happen very often. In fact, I can't think of the last time it happened in the last 15 years. So I'm very grateful for what the Buddha taught. I'm grateful for your reflection on Ajahn Gunha's advice not to be gloomy, because that's certainly been a wallow I've wallowed in, which is not beneficial. So just great words, Ayya, and thank you for sharing some of your retreat process. Monastics don't always do that. And it's just really dear to me to hear a little bit of the inside of your process. It's it's quietly, gently, softly inspirational for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Steve?
I was just reading last night um, a suggestion that I haven't actually practiced with this yet, but it was he was saying that in the throes of the hindrances, our mind is contracted and we kind of lose space. And so an antidote that was suggested was to start with just feeling the space of the body, the whole space, and that can kind of start opening up the space. That the if you look back tomorrow at what what's very constricted um, and tight for you today, and you can look back and say, well, why was I like that? It was, you know, once you're out of it, you're feeling the space again. You can look back and say that was a silly thing to do. So you can kind of use that perspective to see what it was like, and then try when you're in the midst of this contraction um, to feel space, to try to open the mind some. Just a little. It's kind of coincidental that I was just reading that last night. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And it reminds me of like someone asks you a question or wants to make it, make a decision, and you say, I'll sleep on it. Let me sleep on it. well, what does that do? You can be in a complete, I know I've seen myself be in a very different space just asleep on it. It's like what you're saying. You're not in the tightness, you're not in the conflict, you're not in the pressure to make a decision. You're not, you step outside of that. And it's, when the Buddha says everything we need to know, we can learn in this fathom long body, it's all here. Take care, Cynthia. Thanks for letting us know. Get better. Um, it's interesting because I like that suggestion, like why do we want to do body scan? Like really, like there's all kinds of things happening in this body. It has its limitations. The 70-year-old body that I have has some limitations that I didn't have 40 years ago. So what? Look at all the things it can still do. Look at all the ways I can still learn from it. And this idea, this practice of, whether it's Qigong or yoga or some other way that we relate to the body in a way that we can, like bring up a feeling of energy and, or just, using the breath or whatever other focus for meditation and bring that spiritual energy up in us. When we shift, when we make that shift internally, we see things differently. I was I don't know what to call it. I was giving a funeral talk once, a very tragic end of a young life. And I talked about how we don't know, when someone comes into this world, where they've come from. We don't know when they leave, where they're going. But if we had that ability, if we could see, and this is what Venerable Patachara, one of the bhikkhunis, said to some of the bhikkhunis that were at the time of the Buddha that had come from living life as mothers and their children would die. And she said, if you knew where they had come from, if you knew where they were going, you wouldn't mourn, you wouldn't cry. And I use this metaphor of, like, if there's a train passing and it's got all these cars, and you see the whole thing passing, but you see it, you see the car that's in front of you, the train car. But if you could rise above and you could look from the sky, you'd see the whole train. And the whole thing you'd have a different perspective. You can see, every part that goes along. You can understand how that works together. And it's like, yeah, when we can shift our perspective, when we can put things that we're experiencing now that feel so tight and strong into the landscape of the larger picture of life and death and dukkha and sukha, we can come back to a place of greater calm and greater wisdom. Thank you, Steve. I think you raise a really good point, a couple really good points. One is when we have conflict with someone, we can think, this probably happened before in a previous life. There's probably more going on here than meets the eye. Why do people grab onto something and they just won't let it go? Why is it so hard? And we don't know what our part was before, so we should have some, you know, put some space around that. Like I don't know if I did anything to them before that was unskillful. I could have. I've done plenty of unskillful things in this life. Who knows? Right? How about thinking instead of I I don't want to meet you again, how about I don't want to meet you again in the same way? Getting to that place where it's okay to meet anybody again, but without the attachment, without the resentment, without the selfing, without any requirements for them to be a certain way. The more we let go, the more chance we'll have that if we do cross paths again, we can just let it go. If they're still coming from a place of hostility, anger, they're making that karma. What happens if we stop making the karma that makes our part in it? How does that work? We focus on generosity. We have wisdom, so we know. I think your avoidance idea is excellent. A lot of times we just need to stay out of it as much as we can. And let them, I mean, I don't know anything about Aikido really, but someone told me the first maneuver is just to step aside and let the aggressor just go right through. Say, okay, can we do that? Can we do that? Can we see what the wholesome approach is? I mean, the Buddha took steps. He had the announcement made in Rajagaha that Devadatta's character has changed. Whatever he's doing now, it doesn't have anything to do with the Buddha or the Sangha of monks. He's on his own. Basically, don't trust him because he's not trustworthy. And the Buddha talked about the dangers of creating a schism in the Sangha, the karmic result for the person who's doing that. The Buddha had wisdom. He understood the situation as it was, but it's not like he didn't do anything. But he also wasn't trying to reach over into trying to manipulate people outside of his own sphere of influence. So it's like we can learn a lot from this. And if we think about the long-term effects, like you said, I don't want to meet someone in that same way. I don't want to meet, well, many of us have been through some really awful stuff in our lives. And we don't want to meet that same aggression. We don't want to meet that same abuse. We don't want to meet that same thing in the same way. So learning how to be skillful, learning how to be, coming from a place of Dhamma, coming from a place of wisdom, seeing that for what it actually is, and responding in a way that's responsible, that's really based in truth, and not letting it get to us. Like you said, okay, if I feel the defilements there, step back, sleep on it, come back to it tomorrow. Maybe fill the mind and heart with Dhamma, talk to our good spiritual friends, like lift up the mind. And a lot of times, people want to stir the pot. They want to make a problem. They want to cause trouble because they don't understand what they're causing for themselves. No, we don't have to participate in that. And I'm sure every one of us, I mean, I know everybody here really, you're practicing. This is really what matters. It's like, I'm sure we can all look back at times when we were less skillful than we are now. And that's something that also should take away some of the gloom. Like think about, like how far we've come in this lifetime and appreciate that. The more we put our attention on that, the more uplifted the mind is, the more we're in a better position to handle that next worldly wind. It's like, yeah, this is the way it is. Things keep happening. You think the Buddha had to endure criticism, he had to endure, like so much, like all the rules he had to make based on the crazy things monastics did. I'm like, oh man, I can't. And just, and he would just take the next step forward. Okay, this is a situation. Here's what we need to do about it. All right, yeah. And I'm still using that other sutta from the Book of Sixes, like delighting in the Dhamma, delighting in the practice, delighting in letting go, delighting in seclusion, delighting in kindness, delighting in non-proliferation. And finding those wholesome things to delight in, sharing that with each other. Yeah, being kind. It's really amazing how much power there is in kindness. And we got to have wisdom along with it. But when people are mean, when people are harsh, when people are unfair, not condoning it in any way, not giving the message that that's okay, but on our own side, being kind. That we're not going to add to this problem by having the same energy coming back at them. It never works. Never works. You think it works for a little bit, maybe you can intimidate someone, or maybe they'll, kind of momentarily straighten up. But it always has a ramification to it. If we're consistently kind, have our boundaries, act skillfully, be responsible. If we're consistently kind, we don't have to clean up our side later. We don't have to endure the same exact repetition of the same exact problem again. I mean, okay, if it happens again, there's still more work to do, fine. But it's not coming from our energy, giving more power to that negativity, to that unskillful behavior. It's a challenge. It's a great challenge. This is the stuff. This is what we have that helps us learn so much about the Dhamma, learn so much about existence, come to the place where what we want is nibbana, complete peace, complete letting go. We want to surround ourselves with noble ones and have compassion for the rest, but surround ourselves with the noble ones. So I hope everyone is able to make use of the situations you're in and find peace and joy and happiness. capitalize on those moments of stillness and happiness and appreciation for it not being worse. Any last comments? Okay. Thank you all for your practice.